Hello friends, welcome in. Today we're going to take a look at some techniques on how to apply decals. For this example, I'm going to be using the T2 model 1972, the recent release from AK Interactive. Of course, you can use these techniques on all types of models, no matter what your genre or preference. To begin, let's prepare the surface. Now for this model, I'm going to be using a layer of glass coat. Now this can be an optional step. You do not necessarily need to apply a glass coat before applying decals. However, a glass coat makes it much easier to manipulate or move the decals once they're applied onto the surface. Now let's take a look at some of the tools that we'll be using. Of course, we start with some clean water. This can be from the tap. I also use my X-Acto knife with a clean blade, maybe a small pair of scissors. These are used to cut the decals away from the backing paper, some tweezers, a clean brush, and perhaps a Q-tip, and then maybe some paper towel to wick off extra moisture. And we'll also be using decal adapter. And just a preview so we know where we're going, we'll take a look at the color plates, and as you can see, it's very vibrant, very colorful, a lot of decals to put into place. Let's start off here. First, we take our decal, we've cut it away from the backing paper, close to the decal, cut off any excess, dip it in some water, lay it onto the paper towel, allow the excess moisture to wick off, and in a few minutes, the decal will become separated from the backing film. Once the decal easily slides off the backing film, we can apply it directly onto the model. Slide out the film from behind, and now our decal is on the surface. Now, very carefully, we can move the decal from left to right or up and down in order to get it to the proper position. With the decal in place, next thing to do is to remove or squeeze out all the excess water and any air bubbles from behind the decals. For that, I'll be using the soft brush. You can also use a Q-tip or cotton swab to do the same task. Another quick glance at the references, and we can see there's a lot of decals that go into a very small space, making placement, the proper placement, very critical. In situations such as this, I like to try to find an anchor point or a reference point. And on this particular model, well, this red logo goes directly over the rear fender. Once this is in the proper placement, then I can reference the other decals around it. The last step is to give it a quick wash with the decal adapter solution to help lock it into place. This is then set aside to dry for a few moments before moving on. Now, this last decoration on the van is maybe the most challenging of them all. We have this cartoon character, and he's rather large, which presents not much of a problem. He does, however, have this periscope, which makes a long, thin part of the decal that sticks out, and this can be very fragile and susceptible for ripping and tearing. And the second part that's going to make this a little bit more difficult is that trimmed stripe around the van. Well, that has some contour to it, so this is not a flat surface. So we'll have to help the decal conform to the contours of the van itself. Just take your time here. Carefully move things back and forth as need be in order to get to the proper placement. You're not in a hurry, and if things get a little bit sticky, you can add just a little bit more water just to help float that over the surface. Once again, I'll be using the tips of my tweezers, maybe the tip of my X-Acto knife, just to kind of gently nudge and pull and push the decal into the proper position, being very careful not to rip or tear it. It's just the slightest of pressure. Once I have it in the proper place, I can take my cotton swab, or in this case my dry brush, and squeeze out all the extra moisture underneath and air bubbles and help conform around some of those details of the van itself. Moving over to the opposite side of the van, this has its own unique challenges in that there's a sliding door on the side here. Now, generally that might not be a problem if the logo or the decals were already split on the decal sheet, but in this case, they're not. So we'll have to do some cutting of ourselves. So what I've done is just take a look at the decals, where the placements are in terms of where the splits might be along the door line, and I'm using a sharp blade and cutting the decal directly onto the backing paper. Now it's just a matter of taking the two halves of this logo and starting to apply them in the proper position, getting them lined up to the edges of the door, both in front and behind the brake. One final step, and this is an optional step, totally your preference. In my personal modeling, I've either done it or not done it on models. This kind of depends on the situation, but that would be the top coat. Now the top coat is there to help protect the decals from any damage, maybe through handling, and it also tends to help unify the decals with the rest of the finish. Here we have the model final presentation with all the markings in place, and it's quite colorful. I hope you've enjoyed this short tutorial on applying decals and found something that will be helpful in your own modeling. Until the next time, take care.